Howdy folks, and welcome to another Google Cloud Platform technical tutorial. In this edition, we're going to look at working with Delta files in Dataproc, using Jupyter, and some BigQuery thrown in for good measure. Of course, this video accompanies the Medium post on this same very topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow along through the recipe in the Medium article and give us a demonstration of what we've got going on. So the notion here is that I wanted to work with Delta tables. Delta, of course, being an industry format, usually considered with Databricks for working with Spark jobs. I didn't have Databricks available to me. I have Dataproc available to me. So let's see what it takes to get Delta tables working in Dataproc. Now, there's some good recipes for this, but what challenged me was that I wanted to use Jupyter notebooks for running some experiments. So let's go ahead and get started. Step number one, create a Dataproc cluster. So I'm going to go ahead, create it in US Central 1, and I want to enable Jupyter. So Jupyter Notebook is one of the things that I want to enable in my Dataproc environment. Now, if I fired this up, this would create a Dataproc environment with Spark and Jupyter, but there would be no Delta support. So what I have to do is I have to augment my Dataproc setup to tell it that I want to include Delta support. So we go to Customize Cluster, and we go to Properties, and I'm going to add properties. Now, what am I going to add here? I'm going to say that I want a Spark property. Yes. And now I'm going to go to my cheat sheet, which is in there, and I'm going to say that I want Spark packages. So I'm going to bring in some Maven external packages into my environment. So what packages am I going to bring in? I'm going to bring in the Maven Delta packages, which provide me Delta support. Now, we've got to be careful. We've got to use the 101 release of this, nothing later than that, because Dataproc today uses Spark 313, and later versions than 101 of Delta tables don't support Spark 313. So let's go ahead and paste that in. Done. And now we hit the Create button. Now what this is doing is this is creating us a Dataproc cluster with Jupyter Notebook support that also includes Delta table experiences. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video for a second. Okay, and we're back. And now with the Dataproc cluster running, I can drill into the cluster. And now I can go to Web Interfaces. And now I can launch my Jupyter Lab. So what we're doing now is this Jupyter Lab is going to use the Dataproc cluster to run Spark jobs. And it comes up. Now, I've created normally you would click PySpark here that would create you a new notebook. I have a notebook here ready to run. Now what this notebook does is going to create a data frame, not regular data frame, with 4 rows in it. And then we're going to use the Delta table technology to write a Delta table to this particular path in my Google Cloud Storage directory, in my Google Cloud Storage bucket, rather. Now, if we look in my Google Cloud Storage, there is nothing in my bucket. My bucket is absolutely empty. If I refresh this now, there's nothing in my bucket. So let's go ahead and run this. So I just ran step 1. Now let's run step 2. And what this is doing is this is going to create a Delta table in this location. This will run for a few moments. I'm going to leave the video running. We can see it cook. We can tell it's still running because we've got an asterisk here. And of course, the last thing is a df show, which will show the data frame. So it's still running for a few more moments. Nearly there, and we're done. So in principle, this table has now been written as a Delta table into this Google Cloud Storage bucket. So let's go to the bucket. Let's refresh the bucket. It's asking us, yes, do we want to refresh? Yes. And now we have a new folder that has been created with the same name as my delta table. So bucket, table, bucket, table. Now if we drill into this folder in GCS, we see a whole bunch of GORP. Now what this is the underlying files relating to the delta table. These are the Parquet files which contain the data, and if we drill into the delta log, we see this is the transactional log that is used by delta tables. And that's it for this part. We're going to get onto another thing in a moment where we try and access this through BigQuery, but at this point I wanted to show you these were the steps to get Dataproc up and running with the ability to use delta tables, and this is an example Spark snippet that will cause the writing of a delta table. And we created the GCS bucket beforehand, and when we ran this, we saw that the corresponding folder in GCS with the contents of the delta table are present. Absolutely fantastic. Wonderful. Now, the next part of our story. I have a customer who wants to be able to query delta tables that live in Google Cloud Storage from BigQuery. Now, BigQuery doesn't have today the capability to be able to use delta tables as a external table capability. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the second part of our exercise here, which is delta to BigQuery. So what is this going to do? This is we're going to run a SQL script that will create a view on the underlying delta table that when we query that view, we will see the corresponding table data. So let's go ahead and do that. So I created already a data set. I call that data set Delta Lake. And in that data set, there are no tables and views. I want you to notice there are no tables and views. Now, in my script here, which you will be able to find in the article, we name the bucket, which holds the delta tables in GCS. We name the folder, which contains the delta table. We name the data set in BigQuery, which is going to contain our view, and we create the view name here. I'll call it the same as the underlying delta table to make it clear. This is the delta table that will appear as a view in BigQuery. And this recipe here, which I'm not going to describe, this recipe here creates us a real-time representation of the underlying delta table. So let's go ahead and run this DML. So what it's going to do, and it's going to fail because I haven't set the correct location. Ha ha ha. So what I need to do is I want to run my queries in the default location US Central 1 because that's where my data set lives. Done that. Now let's rerun it. And now what it's going to do is it's going to run some DML, which is going to create a couple of tables and a view. One table is against the Parquet files that are found in the Delta folder. Another table is against the Delta logs, which are found in the transaction table and the transaction files. And the third DML statement creates a view. And this view will be able to be queried to be able to access the data. So let's go ahead and query this view. So let's go ahead and run a query against everything in this view. We run it, and what we get back is a BigQuery table that matches exactly what was in the table that was written to delta tables. So let's make a change of it. Let's pick column C, and let's change that to my name. Let's give it an ID of 99, And let's give it a value of, I don't know, what should we do? 3.141, 3.14. And a truthiness of true. Let's go ahead and rerun this SQL, which will update the delta table. So it's having a run. It's updating the delta table. The delta table should look like this now. If we look in the bucket, in the Google Cloud Storage GCS bucket, we see we have a new transaction. We look up here, we should find that we have new Parquet files written. Yep, new Parquet files written. And now, the moment of truth. Let's just simply rerun the query. We're not rebuilding any SQL, we're not running any DML, we're not importing anything into BigQuery, we're just rerunning the previously run select. We run it now, it whirs and it clicks, and lo and behold, there is the new data that we wrote to delta tables. So what we've demonstrated here is that a real-time update to delta tables through Dataproc, live with the delta table manifesting on GCS, we can now execute queries against a view which will provide us a representation, which will provide us the data that is found within the delta table. I hope you found this useful. I look forward to making more of these videos for you in the future. Thanks now. Bye-bye.